All right, we are taking our last look at every team's 2024 season before we tick over into 2025. And today, it's the last one. It's the Premiers, Brisbane Lions. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us how you think the Lions went in 2024. I think it was pretty good. So let's crack in. This season review is brought to you by Skills Beast, the best teaching apparatus to learn how to kick effectively with the correct technique every time. No matter what your age or skill level, Skills Beast will transform your kick. Head to skillsbeast.com to instantly kick better. And to break this all down for me, Darren Parkin, AFL commentator and analyst. Darren, they did it, but they did it the hard way.
They did, yeah. They had to win it from outside the top four. First side since the Bulldogs in 2016, and Adelaide did it in 98 when the final system was a bit different to what it is now. But yeah, they were 0-3, they were 2-5, they were 4-6-1, and I think as low as 11th or 12th on the table at that point. They won 10 of their last 12, including 9 in a row. They lost to Collingwood by a point at the MCG, and I remember thinking that day, like a lot of people, that was going to cost them top four, and that was a shame because they were capable of winning the flag, and they said, oh, well, bugger it, we'll just win it from there. And their only other loss in the run home was to the Giants when they kicked horribly. It was 8-16 to 13-4 on that occasion. But, yeah, they were humming along, probably the best they've looked under Fagan over the last few months of the season, and that's saying something because they've been a top four side for a while, but improved to be the second best defensive team in the comp, and that made all of the difference for them. But yeah, amazing recovery. And a thing of note too is they straightened up in the finals. They've always been an inaccurate side. They kicked more behinds than goals 12 times in the first 20 weeks this season, and then only once again outside of that, or twice, once in the final round against Essendon when they kicked 11 goals, 21. But then in the finals, they only did it once, and that was against Carlton in the elimination final, and most of the misses came in junk time. So They were much more efficient and, at their ruthless best when it mattered most.
Yeah, it's been a magical year for them. All right, so if we can cast our minds back to the start of 2024, Brisbane are coming off a grand final loss, but a grand final loss by a kick. Yep. So their expectations coming into 2024 were pretty high.
Yeah, you've been a top four side for 5 years. You've played in a grand final, got beaten narrowly in heartbreaking fashion. The only way you can go forward really is to finish that progression and to win the flag. And they didn't look like that for large parts of the year, but the way they were able to just will themselves over the line, I mean, clearly it's a raging success and a hugely memorable season. But yeah, terrific resolve for Brisbane, which we'll touch on a bit later.
All right, so looking at the lowlights for the Brisbane Lions this year, usually, you don't think there are going to be for the Premiers, but they did have a lot of challenges this year.
They did. I mean, they had 4 ACL injuries, which is unusual, and all of those players around their best 22. Lincoln McCarthy, certainly. Tom Doty, who they brought across. Kitty Coleman, who was probably their best player in the finals last year, got injured in the opening game. Gardner, who's been a really good stopgap at times for them, missed the season as well. So that all did hurt them and contributed to what they were doing, and the fact that they were able to get it done at the end of the year anyway. The challenge of replacing Joe Danaher, now that was a celebration, the way he retired, perfect way to go out, but sooner or later the dust does settle and they have to work out what they're going to do now, and it's a huge hole to fill. I mean, Hipwood's a dangerous player, but inconsistent. They bring in Day, he's serviceable, but he's not Joe Danaher, so that's a challenge, one of the bigger ones that a club can face, and their start to the season was a low light. I mean, the cruel loss to Carlton, the injuries they sustained in that, they then lost their next 2, and just it looked like they were a side that was, fatigued and banged up, and they were able to straighten up in spectacular style.
Yeah, I did claim on this very YouTube channel multiple times that their 2024 season was a bust. So that was a low light, but they're going to turn it around in the next segment. Looking at the highlights of the year for the Brisbane Lions. So where do you want to start?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, I just wanted to look at the character test mainly, because I think a lot of that comes down to how you deal with adversity. I mean, they lost the grand final by a kick. They would have been burning all through the off-season. Then there was that speculation around their trip to Vegas and whether, some players were angry at each other and there was some infighting. They started the year slowly, so that would have created doubts. Then they're 7 goals up on Carlton and cop a kick in the teeth in that one and lose by a point. They missed the top 4 because of a pretty ugly loss to Collingwood at the MCG. They have 4 or 5 season-ending injuries. And then in their 2 finals, they're 44 points behind the Giants and look like they're gone. Win that. Then they're 28 points behind Geelong in the prelim, a Geelong side that beat them by 15 goals in the prelim 2 years earlier. Find a way to win that. And then it just all clicks and they dominate the grand final. So that's a side that just sort of refuses to accept their fate in any other way than climbing the mountain. So that's the ultimate positive. But also probably the performance of their small forwards in the finals. Archie and obviously Lohman and these sorts of guys getting it done for them.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow it down when the whole year is a highlight. And this next segment is brought to you thanks to Skills Beast, who have been helping AFL players of all skill levels transform their kicks. So in terms of who transformed their game for the Lions in 2024, there were a few, but we're naming Kai Lohman.
Yeah, quite a few had career best seasons like Zorko and those sorts of players, but he's been a gun for quite some time. But yeah, Kai Lohman, 8 games and 1 goal in his first 2 seasons. He was the sub in the first 3 games this year, but played every game ultimately, ended up kicking 36 goals for the year, which included 9 in the finals and then 4 in the grand final. Kicked multiple goals 10 times during the season. So, and he's quite young. He's actually from Ballarat. Strangely, he looks like he's the quintessential Queenslander with his hair the way it is, and the tan and that type of thing. But he's from chilly old Ballarat. But he's certainly I think the player that transformed his game the most.
Yeah, if you took the tan away and then you learn he's from Ballarat, you're like, okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah. There's one thing we know at Zero Hanger, it is headlines, and let's start with the little Vegas rift. We alluded to it before, but that was probably one of the big things coming into the year.
It's funny. I think it's one of those stories that gets written as an assumption based on how well they're going. If Brisbane was 7-0, people would say, the strong club, strong culture, they don't worry about that type of thing. 2-5, people are like, clearly it's getting to them. There's a rift, there's issues between senior players. And I think they look at the incident, they look at the scoreboard and they make their conclusion based on that. But clearly they put that behind them. And look, Chris Fagan's obviously had his challenges as well. But I think what's quite remarkable is, so the Brisbane Lions have 2 premiership coaches, and it shows you how diverse the game is. One of their premiership coaches is probably the greatest player of all time in Lee Matthews, and the other one's a school teacher in Chris Fagan, which goes to show that that education and knowledge of the game can come in many forms and many ways. And he's always been a success in footy, and he now lands the ultimate.
All right, the ins and outs for the Brisbane Lions this year. So we talked about Joe Danaher, who retired, and then also Jared Lyons has retired as well.
Yeah, he's had a pretty good career, Jared Lyons, at 3 clubs, and I think a little bit stiff most of the way. He seemed to get squeezed out all the time, despite being a prolific ball winner, but did a pretty good job. Harry Sharp makes his way to the Ds as well, and then they delisted a few guys. Jackson Pryor's played a bit of footy, James Madden, and a couple of others, Carter Michael, but certainly the Danaher retirement and the way that all unfolded is the ultimate.
Yep, absolutely. And then again in the draft, they pick up another Ashcroft who looks to be the absolute goods.
Yeah, plays a lot like Lachie Neale, Levi Ashcroft. He was probably ready to play AFL 2 years ago. But their draft hand was all pretty predictable. So Ashcroft, father, son at 5, then a couple of academy picks, Marshall, who's rated highly at 5, Ty Gallop at 42, and then they picked up Sam Day to give themselves some key position depth. So all fairly predictable for Brisbane.
Yep. All right, so looking ahead to 2025, if you win the premiership, your expectations are pretty high. But for Brisbane, they do lose Joe Danaher, but then they gain Levi Ashcroft. So the turnover in terms of their list is pretty good.
Yeah, and look, it's been a long journey for them. It's rare that a side is top 4 for that long, but it doesn't look like necessarily changing. When they've got some guys that are getting a bit older, Zorko and those sorts of players that have been in the game, Charlie Cameron, etc., but still going to take a power of beating. They've got a lot of depth. Their midfield is phenomenal. I think a pass mark for them would be to, maintain their place in the top 4. They didn't finish there in the home and away season, but clearly by the end of the year they were there. So I would say secure a top 4 spot, which would actually give them a more comfortable passage to the flag this time.
Review for season 2024 for the Lions and all the season reviews. You can check out all the other teams on our YouTube channel. Thank you, Darren. It is, nice to end on a high.
Yeah, it's been a fun journey, and Brisbane are a fun side to watch. A great way to finish with the premiers who have got a well-deserved cup, I think, after the journey they've been on.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you for watching. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Jump into the comments. Let us know where you think the Lions are going to end up next year. I think it's going to be a pretty good one for them. And catch all the latest AFL news at zerohanger.com. This season review was brought to you by Skills Beast. Instantly kick better. Head to skillsbeast.com for more info.